Okay, and then also, I'm going to just send a link to that group chat really quick. YouTube has changed up their stuff so much, it makes it... There we go. Okay. Share. Copy. Facebook. There we go. Going live with Isaac. Okay. Isaac, where did you get your name from? Did your parents name you after anybody? Oh, I can't hear you. You might have muted yourself or something. Got on.
Sorry, yeah, I did mute myself.
Oh, you're good.
Yeah, my parents named me and all my siblings Bible names, so
Oh, gotcha. Okay. Are you still religious
no,
or
I'm not.
okay?
I
Are your
I
parents still religious?
They are, yeah.
Okay. What about your siblings?
They are, yeah.
Oh, interesting. All of them.
Yep.
Do
I'm the
you?
oldest, so
Okay. Do you talk to them about it?
I actually just told one of my brothers the other day that I'm
Oh.
atheist, so it was a pretty fun conversation.
How long have you been atheist?
Quite a while. This last October was when I made the switch. So
Oh, okay. Oh, that's interesting that you say quite a while, and then in my mind that's like years upon years. But I forget you're a good bit younger than me. Are you 22? 22?
yeah, yep. I just
Okay.
turned 22 this year.
Gotcha. Okay. Somebody in the comments says they don't know what the topic is. Okay, so I'll tell the couple people watching right now. We're going to talk about 3 different topics and maybe more. One is going to be in a society when you have government, what the percentage of votes should be to pass laws. So for if you have a Senate, like should it be 51% passes it, or should it be like a 2/3 and that kind of thing? The other topics we might talk about would be like relationships and like monogamy versus like polygamy or polyamory. I might have to do some definition research in the middle of our talk. And then the third topic might be racism if we get that far. Okay, so that's for anybody that was listening. So, but yeah, really quick, I just wanted to chat with you about the religion thing because I grew up in a Baptist Christian household, and when I hit about 19, maybe 20, that's when I started questioning some things and got out of the religion myself. And I'm 38 now, so I've been out for a good while. But yeah, religion is a very interesting topic. There's a lot of great thinkers out there that are religious that I think are great. And like Phil from our group is one of my favorite people. Love talking to that guy, and he's pretty religious. And it's fascinating to break down his religion and where it came from. Somebody in the comments are asking if you're vegan. I'll let you do that. He says
I
no.
I am not, but I am. I guess kind of slowly moving that way. So, I at this rate, I think in about a year and a half, I'll probably be vegan. But
Oh, okay. You think you'll actually be vegan someday and not just vegan except for hunting or vegan except for like a
oh,
couple things?
I guess I should specify. To me, it's I just care about getting rid of factory farmed products out of my life, and so that to me is like so I would still hunt. I would still like occasionally eat meat, but I would just stay away from anything that is factory farmed. So that's.
Hmm.
But I've been like trying out a lot of different like meat substitutes and just like in general not eating meat as much in my diet. So, but
Hmm.
yeah, I'm not currently vegan, and even when I go like vegan by my definition, it's not going to be what most people consider vegan, because I still think that it's completely fine to hunt and to uh, and I have nothing wrong with like just eating meat in general. It's just supporting factory farming is the only thing that I dislike.
Gotcha. Is there any kind of farming you do support? Like, do you think there is a version of farming that could involve cows, pigs, and chickens that you would think is close enough to not causing harm that you would be okay with?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean here in Wyoming, I mean like cattle are just basically allowed to go wherever they want. Um, to the point that it can actually be annoying because they'll like kind of like tear up like forests and stuff.
Oh,
Um,
gotcha.
but
Are
yeah,
you ever driving and then a cow just walks on the road and you have to stop?
we I have an interesting story. We actually like hit a herd of cattle on the road and we killed like 10. So
How big was your car?
we were in a Toyota Sequoia, so
Mm.
it was pretty big. But yeah, and not all of them were like killed instantly. I think there were like 3 that were dead instantly, but then some had like broken legs and stuff and had to be put down the next day.
Oh,
But yeah,
that
it
makes
was
sense.
it was a pretty wild night. The because it wasn't like an open range road where cattle are, able to just go wherever. Because we do have those all over Wyoming, but like apparently the vet had left the gate open and it was black cows that night, and we just kind of came right up over a hill and they're just there, and we were pulling a trailer. There wasn't time to stop, so
Oh, wow.
yeah, it was an interesting night. The crazy thing is that when the tow truck came, the we were able to turn the car on and it still ran to like drive it up onto the ramp, and so those Toyotas are pretty tough.
Gotcha.
But
Yeah, I would have assumed that even though there would be a dent of some kind, that hitting an animal, even if you kill the animal, that the car would be fine.
the like the the entire like engine was like smushed in half, just because of how extreme it was. And like a cow is going to be way bigger than like a deer or most other things that you'll hit. So,
Gotcha.
but
Well, I don't think we'll stay on this topic for long, but I am curious. Is that something that your car insurance or whoever's insurance on that truck would cover the cows, or would there be like farm insurance that
the
covers?
I I'm not sure which one ended up covering it. I know that we ended up not being at fault. There was actually like a pretty long a court case that lasted like over a year over the incident. But yeah, so I'm not sure. I think our insurance initially covered it, but then when we weren't at fault, they were off the hook. And I think maybe the vet's insurance or someone covered it. So,
Gotcha.
but yeah,
Interesting.
it
Yeah, they should have a dark colored cows should have to have reflectors on if they're going to cross the street.
yeah, I mean, usually those cows shouldn't have. They just shouldn't have been on the road.
Yeah,
But
that's pretty
that
wild.
that would be a good thing because, like I said, there are a lot of open range roads where you do have to be careful, and that wouldn't be a bad thing in general for livestock to have reflectors on them. I'm not sure why that isn't a thing because it seems obvious, but
Hmm. Um, okay, so let's talk about the percentage of votes thing. So for anybody watching, even though the majority of this live stream probably won't be about our society project, me and Isaac here are part of a group that created our own society, a hypothetical one, and we're creating different laws for it. And one thing we're going to talk about is percentages of votes. So us fake lawmakers, how many of us have to vote on a law to make it go through? So one thing I've thought of since the last time we've talked about this topic is I I think in my mind I imagined it would be best for all laws to be like a 2/3 majority, and the more I think about it, I might lean towards there just being something like a constitution that needs to be a 2/3 majority, where you take kind of the most important basic ideas that covers everyone, and that has to be something where if something wrong is wrong in that, then you need 2/3 to change that. Whereas maybe other things like I think what's referred to as like statutes, maybe those should just be majority, but I'm not sure. Do you where do you currently stand on the topic, and do you think there's any laws or ideas that should be different?
Yeah, I still think 50-50, maybe even lower than 50%, especially if it was like a multi-party system. Having it only be like 30 or 40% could still be enough in certain cases. So, uh, but the reason that I like that for the vast majority of laws, maybe for human rights issues it's different, but um, I I I think it's impossible that we first go and set laws that we're going to get everything right. And so um, I I think it would be best if it was easy to switch back and forth. So as soon as we realize something's not working out, we can change it easily.
Mm.
And so then we can kind of do trial and error. Like for instance, I would love to try out universal healthcare. I genuinely don't know whether or not that's better than the system
Hmm.
we currently have. And so like for me, like I would totally be fine with trying it for, 3 or 4 years,
Mm.
see if how everyone feels about it. And then if we don't like it, we can just change it back to what it is now.
Hmm.
I think that that's kind of my approach to this. And so, um, yeah, I just want to make laws easier to change so that we can try stuff out and then we can switch back to if something isn't working. Um,
Okay.
but for human rights, I think that there is an argument to be made that that should be harder to change. But even then, I think that like some people should say that like fetuses should be counted and some people shouldn't be. Right, or some people would say that fetuses shouldn't be counted. So um,
Hmm.
even then, I would be a little bit hesitant to say that
Oh man, they
we should
should do
have a
with
really high.
fetuses. They should do with fetuses what they did with enslaved people back in the day, where it's like a 3/5 compromise, uh, where for the consensus when they decide when they're checking how many people count for like a representative, like every fetus is 3/5 of a person.
I think that
Um,
both sides of the argument would equally hate that proposal.
right, right. Um, Depends on what state they live in. Um, but yeah. Okay. Well, let's figure this out then. The difference between human rights and other things. I would guess. Okay. So when you say human rights, you are referring to negative rights. Is this correct? So like a positive right would be something that is given to you, where a negative right is something that can't be taken from you. So like free speech, that's a negative right. You can't take away somebody's free speech. Not being killed, that's a negative right. Somebody's trying to take your life from you. But then something that we can probably say that nobody deserves something, but it would be good if it can happen, like something like healthcare. Nobody is owed the invention of somebody creating brain surgery, but it would be amazing if everybody that needed brain surgery could get it without anybody being put out. So that's a positive right. Where so like healthcare would be a positive right. Get welfare systems, which I agree with a lot of them. There's some people that they either, let's just say there are some people that are not intelligent enough to work and be a productive part of society, that there should be money that comes from taxes that makes sure they get to eat food. And so that's a positive right. They weren't born being owed being fed by a society, but that's a society giving a positive right. So does that make sense? The positive versus negative?
Yeah, I think negative rights should be included. I tend to lean that maybe positive rights should. Maybe you should be owed food and shelter and just the basic stuff that you need to survive.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe like certain types of healthcare would be included, but some wouldn't. Um,
But would that change? Would it be the negative rights? You'd need at least 51%, or you'd need like 2/3 majority to change to take away a negative right. Where the positive rights is something like you were saying that even like a 40% wanting it is enough.
when it comes to human rights, I think it should be um, equal for both sides. for both positive and negative rights. Uh,
Okay.
just for consistency with like what we are counting as human rights. Um, but
Okay.
yeah, I'm not sure whether it should be 50-50, but I'm thinking human rights, it would make sense to make those a little bit harder to change. And in theory, that's something that should be agreed upon a bit more easily. So there shouldn't be as many people pushing to change it. So it shouldn't be as much of a problem.
Yeah, I could see it with the positive rights. I could see the problem being some politicians thinking that it could lead to a worse outcome, like deciding how much money to give out for like pandemic relief, or various different things, or like a lot of people. I don't know if I agree with this or not, but a lot of people will say that some black issues in the U.S. stem from in the 60s with the civil rights movement, the creating a welfare for unmarried people led couples to not get married, and then so basically it was this idea of like, oh, if I marry this guy I just had a kid with, I won't get benefits, so this is encouraging me to not marry somebody, and then a kid's raised without a parent or whatever. So some people, I think, even though you can call it a positive human right to give welfare to like a single mother, that there can be debate amongst people of like how much to give or what the situation should look like. Now, I don't even know what the answer is, because I don't know if it would be good to remove that and then have more married people that could have good outcomes, but then you have some people that doesn't affect in a positive way. But I guess I'm just trying to point out examples of where there could be debate.
Yeah, and I guess I don't think whether or not you're married should impact like basic human rights. Um, to me that's kind of getting outside um, of the scope for that. Like welfare systems for me. I mean, I guess like saying that everyone should have a right to food kind of involves a welfare system, but
Mm.
I you know I tend to think that's more of like the government should have like soup kitchens and stuff like that. That
Okay.
just where
Okay, well, so here's where I think it could become complicated. So let's pick a random number. Let's say if a woman with a baby that doesn't have a job, she doesn't have a job, she has a baby. If the government gives her, we'll just say 100. We're not saying $100. We're not calling it anything. We're just calling it the 100 is what we're saying helps an adult woman and a baby. Okay, and then so we look at a different situation where you have an adult woman and a baby, and then she's married to a guy that happens to be the father of that baby. And then let's say he has a job, and his job, he makes 150. So the question here becomes, if the government is going to give her less than 100 for her and the baby because of her husband. Now you're saying it shouldn't matter if they're married. So then the question becomes, like, if her husband, the husband, the father of this baby, his job, he makes 1,000, not $1,000, but just 1,000 compared to 100 is what it takes a human to live. Would the government say, this woman's not working and she has a baby, she's married, but that doesn't matter, we're giving her 100? Or should it be the husband, who is legally now connected to this lady and is the father of this baby, makes enough money to take care of 10 people, so we don't give them any? I think at some point that's where it factors in, is people are saying, if you give the money to a married couple, they're either going to be incentivized for both of them not to work, or there wouldn't be any, or you'd just be giving everybody money because a lot of people, only one parent might work.
yeah I think in this situation it can go either way. I don't have a strong opinion here. I do think that the man should be partially responsible, but I still think that, you know, the option should still be there in case he doesn't want to support her, and you know, and I think the baby should be supported regardless of whether or not, you know, the husband wants to support it. So um,
Hmm.
I, I I I think that, you know, there is an argument to be made that maybe we should force the husband in this case to, you know, give just enough to cover the basic necessities. But yeah, but also that's also kind of what, you know, taxes do as well, is they just, you know, force the husband to pay into the system, and then the system supports. So um, it,
Gotcha.
and I guess then it's a question of how much do you trust the government with taxes,
Yeah.
which
Well, and
everyone's
for
different
this,
on.
we can hypothetically just imagine that we trust it perfectly. We could paint like if it were to play out well, what would be the perfect system type of thing.
Yeah,
Okay, so we're talking about human rights. We're talking about positive and negative, which I think are very different and very important to almost analyze differently. But what other laws are there that aren't connected to human rights?
oh, in terms of whether it should be simple majority
Well,
um,
I'm just curious.
or two
For some
thirds.
reason, it's not popping into my head right now. What a law could be aside from maybe a law from like harming animals or something.
Oh,
What
you're saying like every single law has to do with human rights is your argument?
I'm wondering if you think so, because yeah, is it just because you've mentioned human rights, and I'm just curious if you can think of any that aren't.
I think most of the ones I sent on the list I wouldn't count um, under human rights. Like right to roam, I don't think that we would be violating human rights if we denied a right to roam. Same with, I guess,
Mm,
paid parental leave is kind of going into what we just talked about. But then
yeah.
that's for if the woman's work should.
When I
Um,
feel like the right to roam one, it goes both ways. Like if you, my wife just went on a vacation and she was at some Caribbean island type area, and the beaches there. You had to pay to be on them. Where I'm used to beaches like in the U.S. There's no, you can't own a beach, and if you do, you technically like own that beachfront property, but you can't own the sand because everybody can go there. And I think it's very important for there to be places that can't be owned that people can go on, or if they're owned, that people can go on. And I view this as a strong human right. Um, I don't know exactly where I'd land on all the detail of what you wrote about it, but I likely would agree with you. But I consider that a human right to we're on this earth, and it's important to let people be able to have property where they can feel safe that people can't go, but then also to make sure there is plenty of room where you're not constantly told you're not allowed to step there, you're not allowed to step there. Um, I would think of these as human rights, but that they're complicated.
yeah, and right to roam specifically deals with should people be allowed to go onto other people's property,
Hmm.
where and so that specifically, I'm in favor of right to roam for sure. But I wouldn't go as far as to say that that's a fundamental human right that everyone
I
should be
see.
entitled to.
Yeah, okay,
So
and that's that's where I would put the separation of positive and negative, because fundamental human right. Well, first of all, I guess I would say I don't think there are fundamental human rights. I think human rights are usually looked at as either a legal thing or a natural thing. Like, so with the natural thing, it's almost like saying that it's God given, there's a God, or that nature cares. And I don't think nature cares. You know, if you go in a river and that river takes you, hits you up against rocks or whatever, nature doesn't care what happens. Nature doesn't care if a person murders an innocent person out in nature. So in my mind, what a human right is what humans decide is best for their society. And I guess I just feel like what's best for all humans would be to all have this ability to like not be harmed and to not basically the negative rights, where the positive ones are just a bonus if it works out. Um, Like for example, we could say that people should. It's a fundamental human right to have health care. But what if we lived in a time where people didn't even invent health? Like a time before there were needles to, pull out blood or give blood infusions or do any kind of surgeries. Um, Somebody thinking of an idea, the first person that thought of an idea and thought like, "Hey, I can do this thing. If I do this, this will save this person's life." It would be really nice if that person taught other people how to do it. But I don't think anybody alive at the time that somebody discovered some idea is owed that information or the services of that person.
Yeah, I think for me it depends on how easy it is for the society to provide something. Where if
Mm.
let's say it costs 25 cents to fix any healthcare issue, right? Where it's just super super cheap. Then I think that as a society that society should have healthcare as a basic human right. That
Okay.
everybody is owed it. Whereas like obviously today it's still very expensive and it there's so I guess this is we were talking about consequentialism earlier. So I guess this is kind of where that's kind of coming through, where it's like kind of so impractical that the consequences of having some of these benefits would just not be worth the benefit, not be worth the benefits themselves. So to me, that's definitely a part of it. Um, and but I would say for like food, food is cheap enough and easy enough that I think that at least in America, everybody should be eating, and
Hmm.
irregardless of how much money they make or whatever. Like I don't care if they're completely broke, they don't have a job, they're just lazy or
Hmm.
whatever. They should still be owed food, just because we're throwing so much away and it's so easy for us to make. So
Hmm.
to me that does have a impact on it. So um,
Gotcha. Yeah, no, I can see that for sure. Okay, let's try to pinpoint where it might be different. Cases where it could be less than the 51. Um, okay, well let's just look at our own. So right now, I think to pass a law in the U.S. Senate, I think it might be something like a 51%. But to change the Constitution, so every law has to follow the Constitution. If a law can be made that isn't going against the Constitution, so for example, if they create if they're going to do some kind of like a pandemic relief where they're going to send money out or whatever, as long as nothing within that goes against anything in the Constitution, it's fine. But the Senate can't create a law that goes against the Constitution, and the Supreme Court can't accept anything that goes against the Constitution. And so to change the Constitution, you need a two-thirds majority. I believe you need a two-thirds majority in the House and separately in the Senate. And then you change that, and then from that point on, that affects what laws you can make. And so if the U.S. changed it to where it's just a 51% to change anything in the Constitution, then let's say so right now the Senate is majority Democrat. I don't know if the majority Democrat want to remove the Second Amendment, but it's possible. But if there's like 52 Democrats and 48 Republicans, and they wanted to just say we're wiping out the Second Amendment, um, how do you feel about this?
it's definitely would be a bit annoying. And then I guess my response is that uh, as soon as the Republicans have the majority, then they can just switch it back. And so again, this is kind of something that I don't think it'd be a terrible thing,
Hmm.
because we could then see how much
How
we
badly we need it?
actually, yeah, how much we actually value the Second Amendment. Because I mean, there's a lot of people out there who I really do wonder if people just got used to not having guns, even the people who really really like guns, if they just got used to not having guns, if given a couple of years, they would just kind of forget about it and be like, oh, it's actually fine, it's not that big of a deal. Or maybe the opposite happens, and people realize they really, really, really want their guns, and so then they'll go and really make it happen. So, but yeah, I'm kind of okay with just kind of letting this stuff play out, and then once we've actually experienced the effects of these different laws, then we'll all be better educated to figure out what they should be. So that's kind of where I am.
Gotcha. Yeah, I have a couple concerns. So one is that I feel like a lot of countries have let a lot of different things play out, so we can like learn from. Have stricter gun laws, and the countries happen to work out. So it's tricky. I definitely I feel nervous about giving up freedoms, even if they're freedoms that seem to not matter much at all. Like in pretty much anywhere in Europe, maybe not Russia, but anywhere else, if you deny the Holocaust, it's illegal, and you go to jail. So if you live in England, or if you live in Germany or anything, and you like say like on video, you're caught saying, I don't believe the Holocaust happened. Now, I don't see any benefit of anybody saying the Holocaust didn't happen, but the set words you're saying that can't be counted as defamation against anybody or anything, land you in jail, so you don't have this freedom of speech. Or if like they outlawed saying like the N word, or whatever was thought to be offensive, if people misgendered somebody or whatever, these little seemingly little things, I just find it to be scary. I don't like the idea of it. And I feel like the cool thing about the 2/3 majority is, if 2/3 of the people, even then I find it a little scary, but if 2/3 of the people want this change, and then they change it, that's one thing. But if you just get this like tiny majority that are going to say, yeah, we don't need freedom of speech, let's change that up. I don't know.
Yeah, and this is where I think maybe it would be beneficial to have a set of human rights that is harder to change. And I would definitely think that free speech should probably be one of those. I mean, even though that's like not necessarily essential for like, someone to be alive, I still think that that's one of, which is generally what I consider, for human rights, is like, is this necessary to survive? And, and I guess also necessary in terms of like a society for you to survive. So, and even though like, I still think that, yeah, free speech should be one of those things that should be very difficult to change. And I didn't know that about Europe, the Holocaust law. That's crazy to me. That you can go to jail for that.
The U.S. is thought of as basically the only country that has complete free speech. Every country has a handful of things that you are not allowed to say.
Yeah, that's wild. But yeah, I guess I'm glad that I live here just for that reason.
Yeah. Well, the cool thing about free speech is, so back in England, in let's say the 16th century, if you were to say anything against the king or the queen, you'd get like your hand cut off or your tongue cut out, and that was just part of the law. And even at that point, there are a lot of good laws in place, but there's some crazy stuff where you can't talk bad about kings and queens. And basically, the first time, for the most part, that was challenged at all was this idea of people going to the U.S., fleeing for certain reasons, wanting their own freedoms. And then basically the first time anything was put in place, like the First Amendment, was this idea of, you can say anything you want and the government cannot stop you. So it's like it's all about what you can. It's all about what you can say or do that the government has no control over. And And there's kind of never been anything like that until the U.S. Constitution, and I just think that that's such a important thing. Like, so the First Amendment is like protecting your right to talk bad, basically, about your presidents and about your senators and stuff like that. And that's so important because if you feel this fear, like back in the day, if you would have talked bad about whatever the majority religion was in your country, and you're burned at the stake. And so being able to have this freedom to share ideas and to challenge ideas and not to fear, like, if I say this thing that offends one group, am I going to, get in big trouble? And so if you have it where it's a 51% and then some religion, whether it's the majority, which is in the U.S. is Christianity, gets to 51% with lawmakers, or if you have a new religion come in like Islam or something, and then they get to a barely majority 51, and then it's all of a sudden you can't blaspheme, you can't do this, that, and the other. It's not that it was however the Constitution in the U.S. was written initially was perfect or anything, but there's just something kind of magical about the checks and balances they put in to make it to where everybody everywhere in each different section of government would need to agree on this thing in a big way to take away these human rights. And maybe someday we can go through and analyze like the Bill of Rights, the initial 10 amendments, because I think almost all of them are, I know all of them are specifically geared towards your freedom from the government. And that's just a pretty important thing that I think it should be hard for the government to change that.
Yeah, I do think when it comes to human rights, it's a good idea to make things difficult to change. But when it comes to general, and for me, I think that most laws don't fall under that. I mean, the vast majority of laws are like really, really boring stuff. It's like different traffic code type stuff and building permits. And
let's pick a random one. So let's do a traffic one. Think of a traffic law, and then let's figure out if we think it makes sense to have it be 40%, 51%.
I don't know of any traffic law off the top of my head.
Okay, we could just say speed,
like a speed limit. Yeah.
Like, so how do you think speed limit should be decided in your perfect world, and then in a world where we had politicians deciding it?
Probably, I don't know. It's a tricky subject because, like, on one hand, like I think that people should be able to get places somewhat efficiently, but then the higher you set a speed limit, and the more freedom you allow, then the more likely people are to hurt themselves, and which I don't care about that, but they're also likely to hurt other people. So. But I still think that that's something that should probably be like a 50%. And again, if traffic deaths just start skyrocketing up, then we should be able to switch it back and move the speed limit down pretty easily. Is my opinion there. So
yeah. No, I think I agree. Let me write something down real quick. Okay. So imagine we live in a state that has a couple million people. And then on the freeway, I don't know if you can see this, or is it mirrored? Is this mirrored?
I can see it. Yeah, no.
So you got, let's say on the freeway, we try out 80 miles an hour. And then 5,000 people die that year on the freeways because of wrecks that happened. And then the next year we try, let's go down to 70, and then only 3,000 die. And then the next year we go down to 60, and only 2,000 die. And then the next year we go down to 50, and only 1,000 die. Like, I think this is how it's done, and this is how consequentialism works, where you figure out what the outcomes are, and then you figure out what to do about it, like what's best. Now, Now people might see like, oh man, if I go 50, there's this many people that work these jobs that are out of state or at least out of their city, and they have to go on the freeway. And there's going to be so much benefit in the world if we can go more. Well, there'll be more innovation. There'll be all these different things. So maybe it's worth letting it be 60 and take this many deaths. But once you get to this many deaths, it's not okay. And I think that's kind of how speed limits kind of have to be done, is seeing the outcome. If people could go 100 miles an hour and there's no wrecks at all, like when everything's Teslas or something like it, and they're designed to not be able to get in wrecks, and all of a sudden there's no wrecks, it's not going to be like, oh, we want to be assholes, so we're going to say you can only go this many miles an hour. I think all of a sudden the new law would be, oh, okay, no, nobody's dying because we have magic cars. So then it's 100. So, but yeah, I think you're right. I think if we could look at these numbers, and 51% of the lawmakers said, let's do this one, even though a lower speed, if everybody went 5 miles an hour on the freeway, there would be way less deaths. We would save thousands of people. But then we would like remove the point of cars, and there's a benefit to cars. Whereas if you remove the benefit of randomly shooting guns with your eyes closed, there's no benefit you're removing, but you are saving lives, because if you shoot guns with your eyes closed, you're probably going to shoot people. But there is a benefit to driving cars. And so you kind of have to weigh that out and say it's kind of worth this many lives, especially if nobody's forced to drive. If the government said you have to drive at 2 p.m. tomorrow, and then you might get in a wreck, that's bad. But if you get to know the possible things that can happen on the road and you choose to drive, it makes it a whole different thing. And I don't know what I'm rambling about anymore, but I agree. I think that's the type of law that's a 51. I don't know if I would vote against it if somebody else besides myself said that even laws like that should be like a 2/3 majority. But I'm okay with it being 51, where I'm not when it comes to negative rights. Because I don't think anybody's owed driving. I think people are owed all their negative rights. They shouldn't be punched in the face or stabbed or have their freedom of speech removed. But a car, whoever invented a car, that's awesome. They did it. And now that the cars exist, hopefully people play by the rules. And so anything man-made, basically, I don't think anybody's owed that. And so something like that, that's not a negative right, I think 51% is perfectly fine.
Gotcha.
Is that one of the cases where you think even a 40 is fine, or is that just a thought that pops into your head, but maybe there aren't cases where 40% is fine?
No, that could totally be one where 40% is okay, especially if it's a really contentious issue and like nobody can agree. Like you have a bunch of, like, the spread is pretty even on where people land. Then that one, I just like a simple majority. If it's just kind of a multiple choice type thing like that, I think it's okay to be less than 50%.
Okay, so it would be the thing where less than 50 would count would only be if there's no other higher percentage going for something else.
I think so. Yeah.
So it'd have to be like if 20% of people said 50 miles an hour, and then 40% said 60, and then 20% said 70 and 20% said 80 or whatever, then it would be 60 because that was the highest. Whereas if 40% said 60 but 60% said 70, the 40 wouldn't overrule the 60.
Correct.
That's kind of where I was getting confused before when you said, okay. And so I think that would work out for the initial creating of any laws, for the most part, where you don't have a law in place and it's not a yes or no. If so, for example, if people were deciding what the legal age of adulthood is, if you need 2/3 majority and 2/3 don't agree on a thing, it would be crazy to just say nobody's adults until we get 2/3 majority. You would have to choose whatever the majority wants, and then once that's in place, then you need a 2/3 majority or a 51% to change it.
Yeah, I don't know if you would need 2/3 for me for something like age of adulthood. I think that should still be 51%. Um, and
Yeah, that makes sense.
maybe if it's um, maybe the way you go about something like that is you just do like a 51% vote on whether or not to change where it's at. And then if more than 51% want it somewhere new, then you redo the process just like you're starting from scratch. And then just wherever it lands then is where it is. So,
Oh,
but I'm,
scares me to start from scratch.
but
I mean, in some senses, it makes sense to start from scratch if you're looking at like how different people were way back in the day, and then you start from scratch. But there's also something so magical about whatever stayed. Like we fixed up, I think it was the 14th Amendment, which removed the 3/5. What was it? The 3/5 of a person situation with slaves. That fixed that up, and different amendments will go through and will change each of the issues. But if something that was put in place a while back by what people might think are way different types of people, then obviously there's going to be a majority today that are going to be able to change that. So even if if only like 40% or 50% or 51% of people are like, yeah, let's make these certain words illegal to do. If it's bad enough, and it's because most humans will agree on most important things. The things that we won't agree on, I think anything that if you asked every question humanly possible to every human in the U.S., anything that doesn't have a 2/3 majority, to me, I would have to guess that it's such a unimportant topic. Like if I was living out in the wild, the things I'd be afraid of are going to be all the things that would land in the 2/3 majority. I'd be afraid of being murdered by random wild humans. I'd be afraid of being raped or having my family killed or being punched or stabbed or all the different things. Even something as little as being punched in the face. 2/3 majority or more are going to say no. People shouldn't be allowed to punch people in the face, and so anything that's smaller than that. Now there are things where more than 2/3 majority don't care about a thing, like circumcision still exists. Where in my mind that's a horrible thing. But if I was living out in the wild and I was trying to survive and I knew that some village over, some people were circumcising some babies or whatever, I wouldn't give a shit. Like I couldn't even begin to care, But if somebody was sacrificing fellow humans and they were making them suffer to have the sun god shine their light on them, I might be like, hey dudes, let's go, even though this is at risk to us, let's go wipe out these horrible, shitty humans. So if it's a survival situation and you're out in nature, there's just so many things that you do and don't care about. But when we have this luxury of like, okay, life's great, now we can debate what things matter. Anything that isn't clear cut for most people is something that probably doesn't matter too much. Like which cases of being hurt at work should be covered by workers' comp. Now, this is probably a good thing to have it be where people are covered, but the little details of like should this count if you're this far, if you're on your break but you're out by the dumpster or whatever on your skateboard, should that be And so in some there's going to be an arbitrary cutoff, but a lot of these topics that not everyone will agree on, they might matter to lives, but in the grand scheme of things, I think most people are going to agree.
So I guess my question then is, if most people are going to agree, then why are you worried that where we need to have be a problem where?
Oh, it cut out right when you said, "Why are you worried?" The screen cut out.
Yeah, I just realized that. So why if most people agree on these things, then why are you worried about needing a 2/3 majority, right? Because If
Well, I'm not saying most people necessarily agree on everything, but yeah, I mean, I think when something matters enough, at some point, most people will agree on it. So, like, I think in the future, I think like 50 years from now, circumcision will be illegal, and people will look back in horror and go, "I can't believe this was a thing." But it takes people a while to adjust to new ideas and learning new things, and like compared to other things, it's kind of a minimal thing. And so, yeah, I'm not saying most people agree on everything. I'm just saying the most people agree on. Well, I don't know because it really just depends on the time. Because most politicians before the creation of the U.S. Constitution maybe didn't agree on some of the things like the free speech and these different things. And so, yeah, I don't know. It's just
so, and
yeah.
then I guess that's my question for what if then what if they do a 2/3 majority that limits free speech, then times change and now we want that free speech, right? And then
Hmm.
it's harder to overturn because we
Hmm.
only have 51% now that would do it. Um,
Yeah, and so that is a tricky thing. I think there's less concern from that angle than the other angle. I just think so it's complicated. It's going to change depending on if we're talking about starting something from scratch versus something that already exists. It's really easy to look at the ones that already exist because then we could see we could look at everything in the Constitution, all the amendments, and then we could think how many of these are ones that we would want overturned. I doubt there's many things in the Constitution that I'd want changed, and so in that case, it's in my mind, it's good to have the 2/3 to change it. Um, but I I guess what I imagine is to create something, to add something like so. For example, the to add something to the Constitution, you have to get a 2/3 majority, which means something will not be added to the Constitution unless that large number of people agree on it. So it's kind of a way to force people to have to agree on it. Because my guess is if you only needed a 51% to get something in the Constitution, that shit's going to change nonstop. It's going to have things added and taken away, and it really will just be the whims of the majority. I think I think that's a very important thing to think about is that at any point in time there can be really bad ideas from the majority, from the 51%, especially depending on which 51% are even going to be talking about a topic, like which people care enough. And things change. Things the way humans work, it seems, is people will like grab onto something and go like, "Oh, this is the popular thing. Let's go along with this popular thing." And I think that's the cool thing about having the separation of the Constitution and then the separate laws is if you want to add this thing in that will cover people and it'll be this like very important thing, you need this majority. But as long as you don't go against the Constitution, you have the 51. It makes it so when people want to do something wild, like if all of a sudden people said, "Hey, let's slow torture pedophiles," then you can probably find many points in time where you can get 51% of people to say, "Yeah, like this is horrible and sad, but let's do it. They deserve it." And you hang them upside down in public naked, and people get to stab little knives into them, and they'll die out in like 3 days or something like that. I guarantee you can find people to line up for that kind of stuff. And there's all kinds of things. I'm sure there's many points in time, especially in the past maybe 20 years, where people would want to outlaw something like the N word, which would be complicated because they'd probably want to outlaw it for either just white people or anybody not black, which is interesting or whatever. And And so yeah, it could just like I don't know. I just don't.
And I guess my response to that is like, as someone with a minority view, wouldn't you rather have the 51% so you have fewer people to convince? Like for veganism, right, it's going to be quicker to convince 51% than it is to convince the 66% for the two-thirds
That's
majority.
that's true, but I don't want 49% of people to be legally forced to do something that just this tiny number of 51. It's larger than 49, but it's that simple. Like if people are 50-50 on gay marriage or something, and then all it takes is converting 1% of people to hop over to this side, and then 51% of people can tell 49. Let's say there's 49 percent of the population is gay, and 51% is not, and all that 51% is anti-gay. Well, then all of a sudden, 49% of the entire population, they can't get married because the 51% feel this way.
See, and I don't know, maybe I'm completely wrong here, but I would imagine that after seeing the different shifts of um, and the consequences of laws, you'd have bigger swings than just 1%. Where I think that if universal healthcare was legalized, then you'd have a whole lot more people either moving for or against universal healthcare than just the 1% that's needed. So, but maybe I'm wrong there, and maybe only very small amounts of people flip sides. I'm not sure, but it just seems like for many of the issues, there's a lot, like especially like over like the last 20 years, like especially on like things like drug legalization and stuff. It seems like a lot of people have switched sides. So
yeah, well, so I would agree with you. One of my favorite things about the U.S. is having the 50 states, and I agree with you on something we've talked about before, where people can try different things out in each of the states and see how it goes. Like, it's amazing. I can't believe we don't do it more. I think different states should volunteer or draw straws to try out legalizing meth in one state, legalizing heroin in another, and try out these different things. So anything where it seems like there's a trial and error, I'm all about trying out, especially if we have a small sample size to try it. Try one state for UBI, although that would be wild to probably have to force nobody to move to that state until the trial's done.
it's funny that like, yeah, that's kind of implied that like if that so many people would want that, and yet like it's still viewed as like a bad thing. But
Well, it's where it's complicated. So I'm in favor of UBI, being a person that's very ignorant on most political topics. But there's a lot of things people would want that they shouldn't necessarily be given. Like we might all want a Tesla, but can the government afford to give everyone a Tesla? So I don't think the wanting it would affect things, because for all of history, anybody would want a UBI. The question is, can it be done, and should it be done? Now I would say as innovation goes the way it goes, and automation and AI remove jobs from existence, then once you have more adults than you have jobs in a society, the society can't function unless people can survive. And if your society involves money to survive, then once there's not enough jobs for it. Now, before UBI, my guess is we're gonna move to like a 30-hour work week or something like that, to where people can they can work full time, making a living wage, but full time will be less time, which will have more jobs. So instead of a company hiring 50 people to work 40 hours a week, you could hire 100 people to work 20 hours a week. So you're you're getting the same amount of work done or whatever, but you might have to pay people more. but it's just gonna depend on if the companies can handle that. The government might have to supplement for where the companies can't handle it. Anyways, it's so complicated. But yes, I don't think just because people want something means that they should get it. But I do think trial and error is good, and I think in any of the cases with something like that. I don't know if I think that should become like a 51% thing, but I guess that's just where the difference is for me. If we're not talking about trial and error. Now with drugs, you could some people could say, oh, we shouldn't legalize pot. But pot's been legal in Oregon for years. And I think everything's gone well with it. I don't think we have like higher death rates or anything crazy like that. But you could legalize different things, and you could see like what is the outcome? How many more teenagers are doing meth in the meth legal state and that kind of thing. And then you can go like, okay, let's make it illegal now. We did our trial. We might do another trial in 100 years. This one didn't work out, or we adjust it, do the same trial in a different state, but make it to where it's slightly different chemicals, or I don't know. But I think on the things where it's not trial and error, I think it should take a larger percent to say something like gay people can't get married or trans people can't walk the street or something like that. Now, some people might view those as trial and error. Some people might say if you let gay people get married, then they're going to turn all our kids gay or whatever. And then if those people say that, which is I think is clearly silly, and we've already had the trial and error in the U.S. and there was no error, but same would go for that. If it's illegal to have gay marriage, and then you decide, okay, we're going to make this one state have gay marriage, and then we're going to tally it up and see how many kids it turned gay or something, and or whatever, if there's any kind of negative outcome, and then you can look at it and see the outcome, and then know that no big deal happened or whatever. But I don't think you need a trial and error for like taking away people's freedoms for like speech and most of the things that I would care about are like freedoms from the government. So like the Fourth Amendment is freedom from like search and unwarranted search and seizures from police officers. Fifth Amendment is incriminating yourself, which led to like Miranda rights and that kind of thing. And so I think these protections from the government for us. I just don't think. I mean, I guess anything could be trial and error. I don't know. I'll stop rambling. But yeah,
and that's what I was going to say. Is I'm as you alluded to. I'm more of the position that really anything can be trial and error, even the really big stuff. Because like let's say you make gay marriage illegal, then I think then it's going to really make all the gay people mad, and then a lot of people are going to listen, and then it'll be switched. And so. And if people don't listen or there's like just not enough gay people, then maybe it just doesn't matter that much to that society. And I also don't think that necessarily there's I think that the best society depends on the people that are in it. And there are societies where it might be better for things that I don't want to be on the books to be on the books. For instance, if literally every single person is a super conservative Christian in the society and there just isn't any gay people in there and it makes them happier to have gay people illegal, then whatever. But obviously that's just not a thing. So
gotcha. Yeah.
But
yeah. Well, I guess maybe my focus so much is on freedom, and so I guess that's why I think it should take a higher number to remove freedom. So let's say you have 1,000 people that are just living out in the wild. At times they're having good lives because they're still alive, so there must be something good going on. And at times they're just fearing everything. They were wondering if they're going to get killed by snakes and tigers and fellow humans. And these 1,000 people like kind of get together and say, "Hey, should we take this this area of land. We call like this is ours, and while we're in this land, we're going to have rules about what we can and can't do. And then everybody's like, cool, yeah, this sounds good. And let's say they picked what me and you might call the 10 most important things you could vote on. My guess is that if you had 51% of the people agreeing on, the various different laws, and then 49% not agreeing, so 499 of 1,000 people saying like, oh, I don't want you to remove this right. Like I was free to do this out here, but now joining this society, I have to lose these rights. I think there'd be a lot of people that'd say like, nah, I'm not going to join this society. But if you said that we have to vote and the 2/3 majority is going to make each of these 10 laws, and then the 1,000 people all voted, and then the only laws that went in place that changed their freedoms were the ones that at least 2/3 agreed on. And my favorite example is killing. Out in nature, you have the freedom to kill people. You can kill whoever you want, the nicest little babies. You can kill them. You're only not free to if you get caught. But if you're out in nature, you're free to kill people. But if you're told like, hey, in this society, we're going to give you protection, and that protection is the deterrent of people being told if you kill anybody, you're going to jail. And then like everybody's going to sign up for that. They're going to go like, okay, I do like killing people and I feel like they deserve it, but I'll say I won't kill anybody if that means you're going to protect me from being killed from other people. And so if the only freedoms you're sacrificing are the ones that 2/3 of this 1,000 people, I just feel like you'd go like, okay, I can dig that. I can, you know what? Even if I'm in the 1/3, it's like, okay, so I agree with 8 of these laws, but 2 of them passed that I was in the 1/3. Be like, okay, this is fine. The majority feel it. It's not the hugest freedom. We can say it's on gay marriage, not that should be a top 10 to vote on, or even doing drugs. Like, okay, I'm one of the 1/3 that wants to do my heroin and my meth, but these guys are saying this thing, so I'll deal with it. I'll lose my freedom to do heroin and meth if that means I can be away from lions and tigers and be protected or whatever. I just feel like if I was one of the 1,000 people, what would make me feel safest? And I think it would come down to the 2/3 majority. I wouldn't want I wouldn't want 501 people to decide what 499 people have to do.
See, and I'm just as disturbed, I guess, by 666 people deciding what 333 have to do, right?
Then that means you should want it to be a higher than 2/3. You want it to be 3/4.
I think it's a problem no matter what the number is. And so
but which one's less of a problem?
For me, the lower number, so that it's easier to change.
But it might be the best thing to do, but it's got to be more of a problem, right? Like if you have 10 people living in a house deciding what the rules are in the house or whatever, it's going to be a better household if the things decided are like you have to have like 2/3 of that 10 of the 10 people deciding that, which 2/3 of 10 would actually just be like one number more. But yeah, I don't know. Like part of me wants it to be like 9 out of every 10 have to agree on a thing. I just go so far.
But then no one's gonna ever. But then you're never going to get to that number, and no one will agree on anything.
You'll have more freedom in a slightly scarier world. Like really, that's kind of what it goes to. Yeah. Is the closer you go to needing 100% agreement, the more libertarian you go, and the further you go from 100, the less libertarian you go, the less freedom you go. I think something like that.
Yeah, that'd be interesting if someone's done a study on that, to like look at a bunch of different countries and see where all the percentages are and see what degree of freedom they all have. If the ones with the lower percent are really less free, that a good statistic there could be enough to change my mind. But
Yeah.
My guess is there's little to no correlation, but I'm not sure.
Interesting, because that's, I would imagine, because that's the thing, the people deciding. Now it's obviously different if like every adult human in a society got to vote versus just senators, but at very least, the higher the number for the people that are voting, the more or less free, like the more freedom you have, the higher number, because anything that people want that other people don't agree on, if you just had to go with 100%, you would have some laws, very few, but you would still have, let's say 99%. Let's say 99 out of every 100 had to agree on a thing. You would have very few laws go through, but it would be something like that you can't just kill innocent people for fun. And you can't stab innocent people for fun. Punching probably wouldn't go through a lot. I would guess you might get like 10% of people would say it's okay to punch to solve your problems or whatever. Or if somebody made fun of your mom, you can punch them or whatever. So there would be, I don't know, maybe female circumcision would be 99%, especially if you polled people in the U.S. today or something like that. But you would find a handful of laws that if 99%, the only people losing their freedom would be 1%. And that's kind of how that works. The higher the number that have to agree, the less people lose their freedom. If it's 90%, then the most anybody can lose their freedom is 10%. So with the 2/3, the most freedom possibly lost is 1/3 of the people. And but the route you're going, which isn't a huge deal, because some of the things that are 51% or more are actually 90%, but the ones that are truly 51% means 49 people have lost their freedom, because they, even if the only freedom they lost was their freedom to have the law be what they want it to be, they lost that, and that's 49%.
See, but then if it's a big enough deal, then I think the 49% will be angry enough to get 2% from the other side to switch over, and probably even more than 2% is what I'm thinking. Where you'll get to that 60% anyways. But yeah, I'm not sure. And then I guess. And I guess looking at it in terms of like negative rights, it's very concerning. But for positive rights, I'm a lot less concerned about 49% of the
Is it the
population
positive
not
rights that
getting.
you're less concerned with, or is it the things that need trial and error?
It's certain. I mean, again, I think almost anything you could do trial and error, and over time we'll get to a better system. I think that's why, on average, any government today is better than any government 100 years ago, just because through trial and error.
That's
you know,
fair. Well,
we've
so I think like healthcare is something that we could figure out. For legalizing drugs, it's things that like we don't know what the outcome will look like, but we could try it and see. But like we've done the driving thing for a while. Now this is a positive right. It's a privilege. It's not anything that you're owed from birth. But we can see how everything is. Now if we let 51% of people say women aren't allowed to drive anymore. Now I think there are slightly more women than there are men, so it would probably go the other way around. But there's an ongoing joke about women being bad at driving. And I don't know how true this is, by the way. They're probably less likely to drive really fast, like Fast and the Furious style. So they're less likely to die in wrecks like that. But maybe they're not quite as good at the turning corners and such. I don't know. But anyways, if people decided to try to make it so women can't drive anymore, I guess that's kind of a perfect example of like if 2/3 of the voting people or of the adult public said like no, kind of like certain old people can't drive if they've gone to a certain, like if they're unable to drive anymore. I'm guessing even old people would say, yeah, old people shouldn't drive once they reach a certain thing. So if women thought women couldn't drive to the point where 2/3 of the adults in a society say like, yeah, women shouldn't be allowed to drive at all, even the ones that want to, then it's like, okay, 2/3 said it, so let's just go with it. But if if 51, so basically if all the men convinced a small handful of women that women shouldn't drive, and then it's 51, it's just like we don't need the trial and error. We've already tested this. We can see outcomes. We could decide based on outcomes. But if we decide 51% say that women shouldn't drive, I don't know. Just doesn't seem cool.
I think the woman would get really, really angry and would annoy men until they're just allowed to drive because it would be less of an annoyance than them being bad drivers.
You might be right.
And then yeah, it just wouldn't be an issue. That's just I think that's how most of these things would go. But maybe I'm wrong. But it seems like countries that have really bad laws, it's generally the general populace like it isn't well represented in the government, and that's a big part of why the laws are the way they are. But maybe I'm wrong there, but that just seems to be the trend, and so I think if there's good representation, then a 51% is ideal.
Gotcha. Okay. I'll definitely think it over. I gotta hop out of here, but I did want to talk about the relationship thing. How are you doing on time?
I'm good as long as you are. So
Okay. Let's just do a quick little talk on this, especially because I don't think either of us are too versed in the topic. So maybe a little talk will make us go research things or something for our next talk on it. But so what are your thoughts on something like monogamy versus polygamy? I'm going to look up polygamy and polyamory real quick, but go ahead and share your thoughts.
I mean, I don't think I have any issue with polygamy being legal. I think it would be fine. In general, I think people should be allowed to love the people they want to love, and if that's multiple people, so be it. I don't think it's for me, but I don't think that like I can't think of any like strong argument that would dissuade me from having a negative view of that. So
Gotcha. I just looked it up. Do you happen to know the difference between polyamory and polygamy?
I do not.
So polyamory is, well, let me just read it. The practice of engaging in multiple romantic and typically sexual relationships with the consent of all people involved. And then the only difference with polygamy is referring to marriage, so husband or wife.
That makes sense.
Multiple, yeah. So that's interesting.
Yeah,
okay, I agree with you though. Legally, I don't think anything should be done. It's more. My thoughts are more of analyzing what's best for individuals and society. Like if somebody wants to do this thing and everybody involved wants to do it, I think it should be fine. But do you have any guesses on if they're likely to, when they are older, like 70 or 80, looking back on their lives, are they likely to have regrets or made the wrong choice, do you think?
I don't know. I kind of doubt it, and I do think that's an interesting way of looking at a topic as to whether or not people will regret doing something. But I don't think they would. Although, like, I think that people regret, normal monogamous relationships all the time. And so I don't know if that's a valid, even if they did regret it, I don't know if that would be valid because I think so many people, like a lot of people seem to have bad relationships that they wish they never were, had. So,
yeah. So I've been toying around with a few ideas. And so one is, I think the important part of relationships is like having a bond with somebody, like creating I feel like the best way to create a bond is time. And so it's why people have their strongest bonds with like family members, like your siblings or your parents or whatever. That you've been around each other so much that even when you're like hating each other and saying horrible things, you're always going to come back. And so I think with humans being social creatures and people having fear of like old age and death and this kind of thing, it's good to have people that you can create bonds with that you know will likely be like a bonding person for your whole life. And so the cool thing is you have backup people in case like your spouse or spouses, if you're into polygamy, pass away or whatever. Then you have these bonds. You have bonds with other people that you can visit and whatnot. But the reason I defend monogamy as strong as I do, and maybe it's not even just monogamy, but I defend the idea of a two people deciding to spend their lives together, is because the more you're with somebody, you create this bond. But humans seem to naturally be jealous people. And so not only if you're in a relationship with multiple people, your times kind of spread more thin, so you're not creating as much of a bond. But I think you're more likely to, like, it's kind of hard to explain, but like, so if you find somebody and you want to spend your life with them and you decide to get married and whatever, spend your life with them, it's possible that if you could have frozen time and tried this out with 10 people, that one initial one isn't the one you'd be like, oh, okay, number 7 was definitely my favorite. So I'm deciding for this lifetime, I'm going to marry that person or whatever. But I think there's something kind of magical about, like, since we aren't able to do that, the more time you try to find Mr. or Mrs. Perfect, the more time that's going by. So if two people feel like they have the same values as far as this bonding goes, anything outside of that would just be like, so if somebody's in a polygamous relationship, like maybe they're like in a relationship with like 3 different people or whatever, and they like them all maybe kind of equally or whatever, and some of them are imagining they're going to all be together forever or whatever. But then somebody adds somebody to the group, and then they go, oh man, I like this person way more than that person. If I'm going to spend most of my time with 3 people, that person's kind of out. And then 10 years down the road or whatever, maybe they're, after a couple different people coming in and out or whatever, they're like, oh, this is my favorite person to hang out with. I'm not going to hang out with these people anymore. So anyways, I just like, I just wonder how negative that might be. Are your parents together? Okay. Like,
Yeah, they are.
so even though they probably don't have any interest in dating other people or whatever, if for an experiment they were kind of made to, and they each went and had to go find somebody to like date for a year or whatever, they'll probably find somebody super fun and exciting, and the new butterflies and all that will like kick in, and that'll be really cool or whatever. But it would be a heck of a bummer if just because this other person they might like a little more, that could happen with anybody all over the world, unless you get a chance to like sort of shortly date every human and then narrow it down and then see if you landed in their narrowed down. You might have to settle for 10,000's best, you know, and but it's not even a bad thing. Like your parents probably like love each other a lot, and like I love my wife and I want to spend the rest of my life with my wife. But like most people, you could go out like if I died today, my wife would probably find somebody and have like a great time with them for the rest of her life. Like so many people can get along and so many people cannot get along. And anyways, I'm going to stop rambling, but I don't know if you have any thoughts with anything I said there.
Yeah, you kind of alluded to something really interesting on what is better to date someone that you're initially less compatible with, but then have more time, to get to know each other and to love each other, or find someone that you're initially more compatible with, but maybe it takes longer to find that person. It's just, I guess, an interesting way to look at dating. But yeah, I still don't know if anything there is strong enough to, make me think that polygamy should be illegal. I think the most compelling
Oh,
reason is
definitely.
like,
Well, just so you know, definitely, I'm not talking about illegal at all. I'm only talking
okay,
about if I were to like tell tell people that like we're interested. Let's say my kids or something. Like if they were asking like, hey, what's the best way to live life or whatever. You can tell them
okay,
ideas
yeah,
of like this is how you don't get kidnapped and killed. This is don't walk the streets at night. Don't whatever. Like you could if you were just giving advice to somebody, or even just a best friend or whatever. So.
yeah, and I don't know what advice I would give them here. I probably wouldn't give them any advice. Um, I'd,
You let
yeah,
them do the trial and error, and them let you know. Like,
basically,
should
yeah,
should I give? Yeah.
yeah, basically, the biggest thing that would impact like the legality of it would probably be for like if they're wanting to raise kids, and then if that causes some weird developmental issues with
Mm.
kids, that I would be curious to learn about that. But even if it did cause some issue with raising kids, I don't know if I would say that polygamy should be illegal or just that they should be allowed to raise kids. But
Yeah, I could see if separations were more prevalent in that kind of relationship, that could affect kids. I'd say if a kid was used to there being like four parents at home and they had strong bonds with them, but then one of them has to move out because of a breakup, and let's say that I don't know if groups of four people married can like technically like adopt the ones that aren't blood related, like adopt, and then therefore they get time with them outside of and then if like four people divorce and then they're like a kid split between the houses, like yeah, I think that'd be complicated. But if it were to work and a couple like a four couple were raising kids, I'm sure that would be great. My favorite style of how people kind of raise and have family is, have you seen the movie Encanto, the Disney movie?
I don't. What's it about? It sounds familiar.
It's the ones where they kind of have like like special power type things, and like the one girl didn't get it, but one can like make flowers appear out of nowhere, and it has that song like the We Don't Talk About Bruno.
Oh yeah, I just saw like the last 15 minutes of it.
Oh,
The whole
gotcha.
thing.
Oh, that would probably be a lame last 15 minutes. That movie is
Yeah,
way better than the first half. But
really.
anyways, it's just typical like I guess anything south of the U.S. How families are, where there's like kind of bigger houses or houses maybe next to each other, where like the grandma stays there forever, and the aunts and uncles and everybody lives together, and they're kind of everybody is raising everybody. Um, I like obviously I think it's probably good to have like a strong like male and female figure in the household. So having your parents raise you, or or gay couples or whatever. But I like the idea of there being family being close, and there being like values of like respect your elders, and you got grandma and grandpa that are can share their wisdom and whatnot. Anyways, so I like that kind of culture anyways. So having four people that have like a romantic or sexual relationship where they're married or whatever, and then they're raising kids, it's great. But every number you add to a relationship like that, the more risk you have of divorce. If two people or like if 50% of two people marriages end in divorce, then it's gotta be way higher for the others. I would guess, but I don't think it's legal for groups to get married like that. So I guess we don't have the numbers.
Yeah. It's and I don't know if divorce rates again should be a metric that are used, um, unless like I guess it does have a big impact on kids, but we don't seem to care about that with the current system. So I
Mm.
don't see why we would apply that to this hypothetical one. So uh,
Yeah, for sure, for sure. The only thing I can imagine that would keep group couples, there's got to be a word for that that isn't couples, a plural word for that doesn't sound like something weird like foursomes. But anyways, I'm just going to say group couples for now because I don't care if I sound silly. But yeah, if you have a group of four, the only thing I can imagine keeping that together, like making that more likely to stay together, would be if, because they're in a group, it means they're okay with people going out and having like one night stands and hooking up with people. Then I I don't know if that's the majority of what breaks people up, is that people want to go find something new or feel butterflies again or whatever. But if people can just go out and hook up with people, then that might add to somebody not wanting to break off from that relationship. But then the other problem is if they go out and hook up with random people and they build a connection with somebody, then they'll be like, I'm going to spend half my time outside of the house actually. And therefore they're not, they're not there for the kids and the other couple. It just seems like with how humans feel, and I'm only going off of the humans that I've experienced in my short little life in my own society. So I don't know if all humans like how they feel, but there seems to be something where the more you enjoy your time with a certain person, the more you want to hang out with them. So that makes it complicated if you're wanting to spend all your time with one person, but then you meet somebody that you want to spend your time with. And then humans seem to all be kind of jealous of some kind. So if you're accepting of this polyamory thing, you likely either were born with a little less of that, because everybody has more or less of different things. You're either born with a little less of what jealousy is, or you just haven't reached a stage of jealousy yet where you can, it takes somebody being comfortable enough that they feel like they don't need security of a life partner. I think a lot of people want to grow old with somebody. They don't want to wait to find a life partner till later, because if people agree and start young, then it makes sense. Where if they wait, you have a whole bunch of things like other people already found their partners, so there's less people to date around with. And so maybe if people are just thinking like, oh, I'm young, I'm hot, I'd rather hook up with a bunch of people than just one, so I'm going to do this for now. And so they don't feel the jealousy because they are distracted by all the other distractions. Like, I'm not jealous if this person's off with this person because I'm off with this person. And but once they make a connection that they go like, I want this person to give me all their attention, then they'll feel the jealousy of that. And I just feel like it's, unless some humans are way different than what I imagine humans like, it's all going to crumble at some point like that,
Yeah. Yeah. It's almost like there's like two different modes, like a mode of jealousy and then a mode of not jealousy, where and you can really only be in one or the other. And it can get like flipped off. So yeah, I'm not sure though. I guess it's a little outside of my area. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's interesting stuff for sure. I don't know if I have any real thoughts on that. So
yeah, no, it's weird for sure. But especially because most of the things I think about and talk about are more clear cut, or they're more like moral based or legal based, where this is just an interesting way humans can be. Yeah. Because I don't think there's anything immoral about it. I'm not religious. I don't think there's anything wrong with like premarital sex or people deciding that they all, like, there's nothing immoral about polygamy. It's more so that I just find it interesting to see if it likely is worse for the individual that thinks they want it. And that's what my guess would be. But I guess I do need to track down some people that are into polyamory and polygamy. Well, I don't think many people are into polygamy. I don't think it's legal anywhere. But polyamory. And I think with polygamy, it's only been religious people like Mormons. I think legally were allowed to back in the day.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking. I don't know if because I thought there were a couple states that it was legal, but then got
Yeah, let's find out. Polygamy.
because I thought it used to be legal in Utah, then now it's not anymore. But I might be completely off
Yeah,
base.
maybe. Let's see. Polygamy was outlawed in federal territories in the Edmund Act, and there are laws against the practice in all 50 states, as well as the District of Columbia, Guam, and Puerto Rico. I didn't know we owned Guam. Because state laws exist, court, blah blah blah. Treat bigamy was it strictly okay? It sounds like it is not legal at all in the U.S., but I'd have to read further. But yeah,
Gotcha. Yeah, that tracks.
um, but yeah,
Yeah, we. By the way, I'm assuming I know the answer to this, but what are your thoughts on like statehood for Guam and Puerto Rico?
Oh, I guess I haven't really thought much about that kind of thing. Yeah, I was asking somebody recently because I wanted to start hearing some good ideas for how that thing should work. Like, I can't decide if it'd be better if we turned our 50 states into 100 states or 25, like why there should be a certain amount of people per state and how that should work. Would it be better if the U.S. government controlled every country in the world, or if it's good to have different countries controlled by different people, and knowing like what sizes those should be? So I don't know. I don't know. I guess what I would say is if you take an area like Guam, I don't know what Guam was like before the U.S. owned it, but if you take an area and then a country is going to add it onto their country and they're going to own it, if the country adding it on is a better country than the one that they're taking, then it's probably a good thing. Like I don't know a lot about Mexico. But I usually hear bad things about cartels and like their political system and a lot of corruption or whatever. You hear bad things about the U.S. and everywhere. But my guess would be that if the U.S. government controlled Mexico, that would be better for all humans involved in U.S. and in Mexico. I mean, I guess it could be worse for the better country. And this is just me assuming that U.S. is a better country than Mexico. We could fill in that with any other country. But yeah, so I guess I don't have a strong stance. I guess I'd need to be shown examples of why it would be bad for a country to take on another country.
Yeah, and I guess for me, it's a representation issue where um, they they just like don't get to vote, even though all this stuff affects them. And
Mm.
especially for Puerto Rico, there's like I just looked it up. There's like over 3 million people that live there that don't have any representation. So it seems to me like they should get statehood and they should be able to vote for the president and stuff.
Oh
Um,
yeah, yeah, that'd be
so
interesting. How affected are they? I mean, like, so for a while, Canada was owned by the UK, and I think still in some loose ways they technically are. But I think in the 1980s they got their own kind of ownership. So they recognize Charles as a king in a sense, but they got their own separation as well. So I don't think. They're really connected. Like, I don't think Canada has to send tax money to the UK or anything. Do you know with like Puerto Rico and Guam and those, if like their tax dollars has to go to the US? Can they create laws in a more like do they have more power over their own land than say each state does in the US since they're not technically states?
um, yeah, I just looked it up. They do pay federal taxes to the U.S.
Oh, okay.
I don't know about like other things. I'm assuming they have like their own local governments for like their own cities and stuff. Um, but yeah,
Do you know if they
they're
want statehood and for some reason there's just reason to have it be
I'm
districts?
I'm pretty sure that they want statehood,
Hmm.
but um, I'm as far as I've heard. But let me see here. Yes, they do. Uh, this was in 2020. A non-binding referendum was held, and statehood won the vote 52%, almost
Hmm.
53%. So I guess that's another interesting one. With like, should that be 2/3 majority uh, or not?
Yeah,
Or like for
yeah.
like leaving the like European Union, like again, like what about issues like those? Do you think that should be
Yeah, well, my
two
guess is that's a
thirds?
constitutional thing. I'm guessing to add a state, the that has to be there's probably a way that's structured in the Constitution. Um, yeah, let me find out and look into it. But if you're just asking what I think it should be, yeah, I don't. Again, I don't. But well, so part of it is like, does that country even want to be part? Like, are they part of us because they wanted to, and then now that they're part of us, they want to be a state, or did they not want to be? But if they're going to be anyways, they'd rather be a state. Like something like Russia wanting the area that's the Ukraine. Like, should they get that? Like, so if the U.S. wanted Guam, but Guam didn't want anything to do with it, like, should we leave them alone? Like, I don't know how that kind of thing works. I don't know, like, um, I mean, I'm guessing the smaller the country, the less protection you have. Where if the Guam is part of the U.S. and some neighboring country, like if Venezuela wanted to go attack Guam, if Guam's us, we're gonna take out Venezuela. But if Guam's just Guam, then they're not. God, it's so, foreign affairs are so far past me. But also, like, how we handle land and population in a country. Whew, I need to learn a lot more about a lot of other things before I can even have many thoughts on that. Um, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question of like whether the population of a land should get to choose whether or not it's independent. Because I think like it seems like for the most part we many people would agree that's the case, um, but only when it doesn't like you know hurt their interests. I think is when people want that. So um,
Yeah.
I I don't know because yeah, like with like Greenland, like at one point Trump wanted to buy Greenland. Like should like if the people who lived in Greenland wanted Greenland to stay with Denmark, should that matter at all, or should it be able to be sold? Is a really interesting question. Um,
Yeah.
I don't know the
Well,
answer.
so I think part of it, it was settled in the late 1940s with NATO. So I don't know a lot about this, but I know a little bit. And basically, before World War II, there wasn't any like groups of countries that had alliances. And so after World War II, NATO was started, and basically it became illegal to have war. So anybody that's part of NATO, if you're a country that's part of NATO, everybody is agreeing, if you're staying in NATO, you cannot go to war with another country. And you can react to war if there is like a threat, like, I don't know exactly what leads something like the Iraq War, Afghanistan War, various different things like that. But like the U.S. or any other country in NATO can't just go and start a war. Um, and so when it comes to taking over a country, I'm guessing that would be the same thing. If you tell Guam, I want you, and they say, we don't want you, you're going to war, even if there's no fighting whatsoever. If you just walk over there and they don't want to fight, and then you take them, that's going to war. So I'm guessing NATO wouldn't like let something like that slide. So it's probably something like where the U.S. says, "Hey, we want to take you under our wing. You're going to technically be, um, you know, a district of our country." unless it was something that took place before 1949, I think is when NATO was formed. But I would think, I don't know if you know much about NATO, but I think NATO would have an effect on that kind of thing, taking an entire country.
Yeah, I'm not super familiar with like NATO or the UN or any of that stuff.
Oh.
But yeah, that does kind of make sense though. Um, but what if? So do they just not care if it's non-NATO countries doing stuff? Is that how
Yeah,
that
so
works?
if you're part of NATO, you have this alliance. So basically, anybody that's part of NATO will defend every other part of NATO. So if somebody that's part of NATO, well, that's why there's the tricky thing with Ukraine and Russia is neither of them are part of NATO, and so if somebody went to war with France or Germany or whatever, then the U.S. would be there and they would fight as part of them because they're all part of NATO. Where with other countries, we might send aid and do different things, but if the country itself won't say we pledge this allegiance to this group, we're going to do this thing and not fight. Then whatever they do, they do. So if non-NATO countries attack each other, that's their own thing, and we can decide if we want to intervene or not. I don't know how it affected Israel and Palestine. I know it took getting the Senate Speaker of the House, not the Senate, sorry, the Speaker of the House for the representatives. It took getting a Speaker of the House before a decision could be made to back Israel. But I don't know if Israel is part of NATO and Palestine is not. But that would be interesting to find out. But I know that like if a country started a war, like if the U.S. started a war with with any country, NATO would say you are out. Like NATO would still be an alliance that the U.S. wouldn't be part of. It's just that if somebody goes to war with you, then you get involved. So and I'm guessing that's how Iraq and Afghanistan war happened.
And NATO is not, or sorry, Israel is apparently not part of NATO,
Oh,
but
it's
they are
not.
considered a ally of NATO. So,
Oh, interesting.
um,
Okay.
but yeah, I don't know. I'm doing one of my classes is diplomacy and negotiation, and we are doing this massive Israel Palestine negotiation that just happened to coincide with the war. And so we have to like take all the current events into account, and it's been pretty
Interesting.
but
Cool.
yeah, but that's kind of interesting because it's the problem isn't Palestine, it's Hamas, and they're kind of completely different entities, and Palestine doesn't really have any control over Hamas. So, but yeah, it's been an interesting project for sure. It's a lot crazier than I thought it was going to be. So
Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to hearing about that as you go through that class. Anything you find out, I'm curious to hear about. I better hop off here, but I'm going to be doing some writing on that topic we were talking about with the polygamy and the monogamy thing, and I might send that your way to see your thoughts on that. And then next time we get a chance to talk, it'll be cool to talk about that racism topic.
for sure, yeah.
All right. Well, Isaac, you have a good day, and I will see you later.
See ya.